I'm thankful for my family. I guess that's about it. That's enough, isn't it? All of them together?
Yep. Um, what was it like growing up in the 1920s and 1930s?
Well, in the 1920s I was pretty young. I started out at zero in 1921, and I was by the not, 30. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Um, I guess growing up the first 10 years, I really was more like just going to school. You know, you're going to grammar school, you don't have time to think about it, you just go. And then when I went to high school, I spent some years there. And that's when I began to think about things and ask questions about matters and made up my mind tentatively about certain aspects of life. But I grew out of it and eventually got older and wiser.
Can you expand on that? Like what kind of neighborhood you lived in, what kind of schools you went to? Or where did you live growing up?
Well, in my first years were in the west side of Chicago in the area called Gregory. It was near a Gregory school. And I went to school there. I was part of the school there. And then when I was about 10, that's when I think you're asking me the second question, isn't it? About 10, 11? I went to high school when I was 12. Went to first to John Marshall High School, and then I went to Senn in the north side. Senn's a very fine school. And that's when I began to study and learn and think the best I could. And that was the beginning of my education.
Who do you think made the largest influence on you growing up?
That's a tough one. When I was really growing up, I suppose my parents were a primary source of thought and challenge. And when I went to high school, I started to think for myself and to develop ways of looking at life through my own eyes. But it was a long process. It didn't happen overnight. It takes time to think through things. And I tried to do it, and I succeeded to some extent.
What was your first job?
My first job I went to, I was in the beginning college, and the man who ran my father's company, his plant, died suddenly. And my dad said, at 18, you're going to have to go to work. So off I went. And I went to work during the day, and I went to school at night. I kept my going to school and working, and gradually took over some of the operations of the business.
So that company, that was the glove company, correct?
Pardon?
That was the glove company, correct?
Gloves were one part of our company. It started out as a glove company, but in the early years it changed. And in the last several years of our company, we made clothing that were protective clothing. In other words, workers who worked in jobs that were hazardous needed certain kinds of equipment on their bodies, and we made that equipment for them.
What was it like being Jewish in America, but seeing World War II happen in Germany?
No. In America, being a Jew is always a matter of one's preference and freedom and pride. I was always proud of being Jewish, and I always felt being Jewish was something to be worthy thinking about, talking about, studying, and learning about. In Europe, I don't think they had quite that experience, at least not all of Europe. I don't know about a lot of it. But I think that the United States background, the freedom we had of being Jews and Americans and anything else we wanted to be, gave us a broader and more intensive understanding of what life was about.
How did you meet more Grandma?
Well, Grandma moved to, when she was 15 years old, she moved to Chicago from Aberdeen, South Dakota, which is, to me, loudest and darkest America. I never heard of it before. But she came and she settled near in the north side, and I met her, and believe it or not, within a year or two, that was it. We were going to be married, and we did. We were married. And it was a beautiful relationship, to which I'm very indebted to Grandma for much.
You met at the synagogue.
Yes, we went to the synagogue too. That was where I guess you could say we met. We were in the high school of the synagogue. And that's, I guess, I never thought of that. I think that's how we did do a lot of our meeting, in the synagogue. And Judaism became as much a part of our lives as anything else. Everything else, in fact.
When you look back, what do you think is your greatest accomplishment?
Raising my family, I think, is my, and I didn't do as much of that as I think Grandma did, but I was always very proud of my children, and I think it's true to say that in all the years I was father, I don't think we had a harsh word between us.
What was your favorite childhood memory?
That's hard. That's the hardest question you asked me. The hardest.
Favorite.
How would you put that? Say that again, would you?
Favorite childhood memory.
Oh, favorite. That's funny. I always enjoyed whatever I did. I always wanted to do whatever I was given to do. And I always was curious enough to know about life to want to find out what it was all about. I suppose thinking about that was probably my favorite occupation.
How about when more Grandma helped you get better at school?
Your mother.
Oh, that's a story I'm not sure you want to hear about, but I'll tell it to you.
Okay.
I was rather a good student, was a very young child. When I got to be about 9, 10, 11, I decided I'd had enough about learning, which is rather stupid, but that was the way I thought. And I got in with a group of boys who didn't care much about studying. And so I had skipped two grades to get to where I was. And the teachers, learning that I had no interest anymore in what they were teaching me, said they're going to put me back to do the grades I skipped. Well, Grandma, if she was a mild person, she was really not very mild about that. She went to my teachers and she said, give me 1 month to teach my son. I promise. We talk about it. And I, excuse me, I'll catch myself. She said, in 1 month I'll have him at the top of the class. And I was at the bottom at the time. And in 1 month I was at the top of the class. And in fact, the teachers had to put me down to let me answer any more questions. Answer your questions. I mean, I remember all these things. I didn't realize I was thinking about them. Anyway, that was what, from then on I had no hesitation. I just wanted to get schooling and get through with it and get on with my life.
So, how would you say your mom helped you in that way to grow as a person?
And she just said to me, here are books. Learn what's in those books. I had no choice but to do exactly that. I guess we talked about things. I can remember what happened in those years. But she brooked no dispute. She knew I could do it, and she was determined to see that I did it.
So, what were some values and goals that you and your family had throughout life?
You should know that. That's the right question. Let's see.
This is the last one.
I would say that
You don't have to use,
whatever you do, do it well. Don't compromise, do it well, everything. And don't be afraid of anything to learn it. Learn it, and be sure you know what you're talking about. And that was it.
ask him about his college. How to get to college.
How'd you get to college, and
How to get through it.
tell me about your college years?
Well, I went to Northwestern, and at the time, I started well enough. I met some very fine teachers, some of whom I remember to this day. One was a professor of English and a professor of physics. That's almost impossible to be. And he and I, his name was Moody Pryor. And we were good friends, and I met other college people who I liked, and they seemed to like me too, I guess. What else? What did you want to know
How
about?
to get through it.
Just how'd you get through college?
Oh, I read the books.
Yeah. Ask him about his
I
major.
read
Ask
the
him what
books.
his major.
All the books, and I thought about what I was reading.
Like, I had to go at night.
Yeah. Ask him what he majored in.
What did you major in?
I had two majors. One was economics, and one was English literature. I studied economics primarily at the beginning. I got to within 4 classes of graduating. All 4 classes were in statistics. I could never have done it. I didn't. So I switched to English literature. It took me another 5 years to get a degree, but I learned a great deal. I had some wonderful teachers who made me understand what reading is not just pages or stuff, life that's important. And you come to learn that, you don't learn anything else. And I've learned it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. I hope I answered some questions for
Anybody
you.
have any other questions now that Jack is done?
Zach, you can stop here think, but we can keep asking
Yeah,
questions.
right,
Happy
exactly.
birthday.
Zach's
Do you have any
talking.
more
I haven't
questions?
Great
even
job,
thought
Zach.
of, I haven't even thought of these things for so many years.
Ask him about his dad. Tell us about his
They
dad.
bring back so many memories.
You can have.
Zachary, ask him about his
They
dad.
were good years, and I'm happy that I had to help to get them.
What about your dad? Well, talk about your father a little bit.
My dad was a very dedicated man who grew up in a farm in Michigan, and then his whole family left him there at the age of 14 to operate that farm by himself. I can't tell you what marks it left on it, but I know it left. and I'll never really understand it, but it came out. He became not only a good businessman, he became a lawyer, and I suspect he became quite a good lawyer, but in those days, unlike it is today, you couldn't make a living in many of these occupations. So he went to work for a company selling meats, like you may, I don't know how to even describe them, corned beef or steaks or anything else, and restaurants. His territory was Gary and that area, which is south of Chicago, and an industrial area. And he made some very good friends. And they inspired him to, well, I don't take that, he inspired himself to study and to learn everything he had to learn. You've done no sacrifices, you'll learn. And he created a business devoted to creating not only gloves, but all sorts of clothing, as I said, protecting people. That was our business throughout the years. And we were prominent in it. We did pretty well.
Could you say how?
You guys can speak now.
Okay. Dad, could you explain better how the business started?
The business started with 3 people. My father, when I was selling, he got a man named Bill Wissowati who did some of the work, and Bill Wissowati had a niece who did the other work. The 3 of them started the business. That was the whole business.
Never knew that.
And within 7 or 8 years, he had 70 or 80 employees. And then I started to help him, and we got 3 or 4 plants going. It was, we were known as a good business and knowing how to treat our customers and how to take care of the workers who depended on us. I guess that's the secret of our success we had.
So Dad,
What was the first product he made? Was it gloves?
What was the first product?
The first thing they, like when they started?
What was the first product you made?
Pardon?
What was the first product you made?
The first product were gloves. Not work gloves, but safety gloves, protective gloves, gloves that people who were working with high intensity electricity could work with and still be safe, and other kinds of protection. Then we added on all these other protective materials until it became rather large. In our industry, it was a rather large industry of protection for American workers.
so
Wait, I want to just say one thing that I think is really important that Grandpa won't talk about. Combining his complete love of learning and knowledge with the business, he single-handedly turned himself into an expert in the field of safety clothing. And Grandpa, from this little company, Sager Glove, little to medium, 3 or 4 plants, served on board. People from U.S. Steel, Alcoa, Reynolds, General Motors, these people would call Grandpa for his expertise in safety. And Grandpa ultimately started traveling the country speaking at safety conventions because he was an expert at things that nobody else knew about. And it was only through his like I said, it's a combination of his work ethic as a businessman and the side of him that loves to learn. He never, ever knows enough. You see, I mean, the man surrounds himself with books. He can never learn enough. And he combined those 2 things, and for decades, he was the guy that people called when they had a problem. When somebody built a plant and they didn't know how to protect their people, whether it was something Grandpa's company did or not, they still called Grandpa to say, can you help us figure this out? Wow. And he did. He wrote papers, he gave speeches, he went around the country. I mean, he just, through sheer will, made himself the best in the field of safety clothing for a long time.
And he could never have sold something that he didn't understand
Right.
what all of its ramifications were.
And he would gather the people in the industry because he was so well regarded. He would call people from these chemical places and from
Like
these
DuPont.
laundering places and
They work-
manufacturing. And he'd say, look, we've got an industry that's growing. We need to figure out how to protect these people. And he would get the greatest minds together and he would work it out until they figured it out.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
He used to work with DuPont.
DuPont all the time.
Yeah.
And their science and their
Yeah.
innovation division, whatever it is, technology division, words change over the
Research and
decades.
development.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. He was, and
Wow.
you'd see General Motors, DuPont, and U.S. Steel, and blah blah. Richard Sager. I mean, it's like, and he was just that guy. It was amazing.
In the late 1960s, the hottest sport, one of the worldwide, was Formula One racing.
Yeah.
And the
Steve
number one
Jackie
racer
Stewart.
was Jackie.
Stewart.
No, it's not Stewart. Jackie, and Jackie.
Stewart.
I thought maybe it was Jackie. Yeah, Jackie Stewart. You're right.
The race car driver.
Called him,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
Grandpa, being the sports fan that he was,
I knew nothing.
said he didn't know why she was calling him.
Yeah, right.
And the other story was he had to talk sports sometimes, and the Bears had a great running back named Gale Sayers, who ran all over the Detroit Lions on a Sunday. He was talking to people from Ford and other places in Detroit on Monday, and they kept talking about Gale Sayers. And he came home and he looked at Judd Nye and said, "Who is this Gale Sayers woman? And what did she do to Detroit?" And we were we just stormed out of the room and said, "How could anybody not know who Gale Sayers was?"
But actually, my favorite story about that is that Steve McQueen starred in a film by the name of Le Mans.
Yeah.
Right? And they asked Dad, Steve McQueen starred in a movie and he needed race car gloves.
Right.
And they asked you whether you wanted to be paid
Yeah.
or whether you wanted your name in the credits. And you said you wanted to be paid.
And he said, "There's no value in having my name at
In
the end
the
of the movie."
credits.
And we all said, "Look, we can tell our
The
friends
thing
your
is, I
names
got
up there."
that. Anyway, I got both.
You did get both?
So,
I didn't know
that's
that.
good publicity, but, it's not that big a field.
And then in January 1967, January 1967, the Gemini program,
Yeah.
which is the second part of
Just gonna say that.
the space program, caught on the capsule caught on fire.
Yes, yes.
Do you know,
What's
now,
a famous?
it was famous. Famous for a couple reasons. One,
Right.
there was a major snowstorm in Chicago that day. Grandpa was caught in Atlanta. Judd decided not to come home. We're gonna have to day off of school. I'm gonna go visit my friends. Got stranded in Chicago.
What year was that?
January 21st, 1967. I think is the exact date.
Yes, it was the year I graduated
Yeah.
from. I had just come home from my final.
Yeah, and I called you because I was stranded. And I said, "Sir, you gotta come pick me up." And you go, "I can get out of the driveway."
And Dad could not get home for 5 days.
In
He
Atlanta.
couldn't understand what was going on.
So we were. It was a Friday night. It was one of the first Friday nights. We were sitting and we watched this on TV, on the Grandma, Sarah, and I, because it was your mom was at college, Judd was at a friend's house stranded, and Dad was, but they called Grandpa after, and he actually had to build, make the equipment to be in what was called the White Room, which is when they put because if anything were to happen, that they could go in and get them.
But subsequent to that, he also did work with NASA.
Wait, had he
For
done it
years.
before that? It was
No,
only subsequent.
they
It
went
was
to him and asked him to do
subsequent after that. I didn't know that. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
He built stuff for the astronauts. I mean, he was involved in all that kind of stuff. He built bulletproof things for police departments. He did fire. I mean, he was everywhere.
And
It was incredible.
And what we discovered years later was the other part of that was being worked on by the Air Force. That was Michelle's father. But they never communicated. They never had talked to each other during that period of time. But they worked in the same project.
Wow.
And they realized it when they started talking
When we got engaged.
and they got engaged that they were both on either side of this.
Wow.
Just want to add one word. Having, how can we talk about it? Having Graham at my side was a major part of my life. Always.
For all of us, Dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she actually became a business partner with you. She came into the office and became the social aspect of your business.
It was more
And the people loved her. They called just to talk to her sometimes.
Oh, he had a lot. She well known among many of my customers.
Yeah.
And she's a very bright woman.
Didn't she have to go to
Always
South?
self-effacing. She never.
Didn't she go to South America once?
Pardon?
Didn't she have to go to South?
She went by herself to South
Central.
America. She asked me if she could go. I thought it was crazy. No.
And off she went.
Oh, that dude told Grandma's crazy. You gotta
That's
go.
it.
Anyway, she decided she was going, and I said, okay. I have every faith in your ability to handle it, and I'll give you every bit of information I can give you from here. But you'll go, and you'll see. And by gosh, she did it. She went to 2 or 3 different countries in South America. She made some good contacts. She even got some customers. She's good. She's really very good. Anyway,
When was that?
that's a tale long to be told.
When was
Yeah.
We
19
were already out of high school,
You
or I
were.
was out of high
I
school.
think like 1972. I mean, that was before.
You're talking
70s.
70s.
How, so
I was
how
gonna
often
say,
would you
I
talk?
knew-
Like, would you talk?
I
Would
knew
you talk to her in
she
South
was
America?
married.
Would you call her?
I sure. Oh, yeah. You know, phones could get there. I could get there too. And,
Right. But you had to use a phone. You would call her once a day.
Landline.
no, I doubt it was once a day.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Because the days were a little bit different. It was,
Yeah, that's right. The time changed.
But I did talk to her a few times. Finally, I met her at the airport and she came home.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that.
When did you when did you ride your first car?
Oh, that's a good
You
one.
what?
When did you ride in your first car? How old were you? 'Cause-
When did you get your first car?
I
or
got-
even or did your
my
parents have a
bought
car?
me. My parents wanted. See, I started college early. When I was 16. And they wanted me to be able to drive to work and school, but I was in Northwestern and we lived near there. So they bought me a car, and sure enough, my little Plymouth, and I went up and back.
Wow, you drove a Plymouth when you were 16.
No, you were 15,
Well,
weren't
what-
you?
No, you weren't allowed to 15.
Wow, it's been 16
Maybe
for
it
all
may have
these
been,
years.
I don't know, but as far as I remember, I was 16 years old.
Wow,
And
the roads had to have been different than they are today. Or are they the same?
but they were challenging, you might say. I didn't enjoy driving because there were too many cars around. But I always did it, and I always had passengers who went with me. Some of the students couldn't afford certain things, so I gave them lifts to and from school.
Yeah.
And to this day, he knows Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
The
They all-
grid.
that
He
whole
knows what's
generation.
west and what's west. I guess
He knows
everything's
it as
west.
well as I do. I've been driving it
Everything's
for
west.
25 years. I've been
Yeah.
driving Chicago. He
Yeah.
knows it as well as I
But he
do.
can tell you how many, it's 2200 west.
Right.
Or it's,
Watch this. Diversity. What number is diversity?
Pardon?
What number is diversity?
Diversity is, diversity is only about 1,200.
You know it. 2,800.
It is 28.
I think it's 2,800.
Oh my God.
No, you know it.
knows.
You know all of it.
Dad, do you remember why you used to like to come to red lights when you were driving? Do you remember?
Yeah, I gave you a chance to look at some other music.
No, no, it was
Either
you
read
used.
or shake.
You always had something next to you.
Oh yeah, I was in a book.
Always had a book in the car, and he would want to get to red light so he could take it out and read. He couldn't be away from his books. He had to stop at the red
We
lights.
tell you we were at a museum.
In those
at the,
days, I didn't have the time for
Science
anything
Industry
else.
Museum,
Right.
and they have an exhibit. They brought a U-boat, real U-boat from World War II.
Yeah.
They brought it here. And there's a film about how they carried it across Lakeshore Drive. He was there, stopped in traffic when
Right.
they were going across
Yeah.
Lakeshore
Oh, yeah.
Drive.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I've been
Yeah.
in that. That's
It's
been there for
unbelievable.
years,
Yeah.
hasn't
They had
He
to
remembers
lift the thing. They had to use these wooden things to lift the boat, this U-boat, across, lift it and put it down in this exhibit, build the exhibit. This thing is a massive thing. They carried it across, and he was sitting there reading a book while this German U-boat from World War II is going across Lakeshore Drive.
it? You realize he's a precursor of texting.
Yeah, right.
I had no.
You know, I gotta tell you something.
Do to worry about German.
Thanks, bro.
Grandpa could never have been a texter in the car.
What is
He was
that?
too busy reading and shaving at the same
Yeah,
time.
right, right.
Shaving.
Right.
Shaving.
There is, by the way, a multiple hour interview with Grandma and Grandpa
Yeah.
that these
I love
guys
that.
did.
Yeah.
That's on our Taylock YouTube
But this
channel.
is, some of this is new information, isn't
Some of
it?
it.
You know, every time he talks, there's just a little bit
Something
that's
else
new.
comes out,
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know, like
Tom should
that
post
company
this.
started with
I'm
three people.
gonna
I
give
never
it to Jeremy
heard
to
that.
post.
You gotta post this on
I
Taylock.
never heard that the company started with those three people.
So the,
Yeah, I didn't
the-
know that.
the-
I never knew that.
So the story, when the reason why Grandpa started the company, Sacred Glove, was when he was in Gary. Didn't he see a lot of people injured?
That's right.
Wow.
He learned by working in that area. He on a Saturday evening, for example, when most people went out, people had bandages on their faces and their bodies, and they were just. And my dad decided I got to do something about this, and
Wow.
he did.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's incredible.
Do you know how your parents met?
No.
Yeah,
They met. That was it. You know.
They met,
No
that
days
was it.
doesn't
Were
hardly
they?
meet.
Was your dad was born in Chicago also?
My dad
They
was
were-
born in Chicago. My mother was born in New York.
on Henry
But she
Street.
married. She moved here when she was about 6 weeks old.
It's incredible how long the Sagers have been here.
In
That's
the country.
incredible.
She was born on Henry Street, wasn't she?
I think so.
Lower East Side.
Yeah. Oh yes.
So
But
tell,
she moved here. They both moved here. And at
was in
some
the
point,
synagogue.
my father decided that his wife is going to be my mother, and that was that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a telephone in your house from when you were a little kid?
Always.
Had a telephone.
I always had a telephone. We couldn't get along. My father couldn't get along without a phone.
Oh, yeah.
That was
He
a
had to
luxury.
be,
That phone in the house was
And,
an absolute luxury.
just
I know it doesn't seem
use it.
possible, but it was.
Same thing with a
So-
car.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
there were not a lot
They
of
did
cars
not-
in the
they-
1920s.
Not
He
for
did
16-year-olds
Oh,
to have their
For
own.
a-
right.
Grandma talks about how when she married him, everybody thought she was.
Because he
Yeah,
had a car.
because he had a car.
so every on
I wanna
Friday
thank-
nights.
Thank you all for reminding me of all these
So
things.
Grandpa,
Thank you, Grandpa.
on Friday nights, tell them you used to go visit your mother, your grandmother, our grandmother, every Friday night. You used to go visit her for one reason. What was the reason?
I visited my
After
grandma.
after Friday night dinner, you'd go visit Grandma and Grandpa, your parents.
Didn't I
No,
go
we,
to
no,
visit?
no, we always.
We had dinner.
went there.
Afterwards, later.
Did I go there to be?
We went for dinner, but after when they could no longer do dinner, he would go visit. Why did you go? What did you get when you went to visit?
I mean, you know what I mean?
Oh yes, you used to bring something
Oh,
home.
yeah.
The chocolate cake.
Why?
Why? You were bribed.
Bribed?
Didn't
A
you?
dessert.
What was the dessert?
That could be.
Do you remember what Grandma Sager used to make? Used to
Dessert.
bake. She used to bake.
She's a good baker.
Yeah. She
What was your favorite?
I don't remember.
Dessert. Friday night dinner always had the same dessert. Every Friday night.
What was it? You know?
Chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake.
With the white frosting.
No chocolate
Every
cake.
single
Yellow
Friday.
cake with chocolate frosting.
Taste it.
No.
Yes, you can taste it.
The one he brought home was
Every Friday night for decades.
Wait,
that was
what
dessert.
cake do you remember?
Chocolate cake.
Chocolate.
With white frosting.
No, chocolate frosting, white inside.
white inside.
Always.
Yellow inside. Yeah.
Yellow or white. Yellow, but it was
What
always.
about the chocolate cake with the white frosting?
I don't ever remember a white frosting.
Sarah Herson has that recipe.
That
It's
was-
from Grandma
I
Sager.
must have, I don't remember a white
Oh, I
frosting.
remember that
Do
one.
you remember a white frosting?
No,
I don't
chocolate,
remember
chocolate.
ever seeing a
Coconut,
white
coconut
frosting.
white
She
frosting.
used to take toothpicks, put them in,
Yep.
and wrap
The
it.
aluminum foil around it. so
And
it wouldn't smush.
if it was good, it lasted till about Tuesday. And by Tuesday, it was like dry. But
She made the best mun cake. Do you remember her mun cake?
Oh, yeah.
Your mother's mun cake?
She's a good cook.
Yeah.
her taillock
Her
was good.
teglach. Oh, that was.
Cheryl took over the chocolate cake for
Oh
many
my
years
God.
after that. It's the same basic,
That's
same
right.
concept.
She made teglach. She made hamantaschen.
Hamantaschen.
Who?
Grandma
Mom?
Sager.
Oh.
Grandma Sager made yeast
Hamantaschen,
hamantaschen.
yeah.
Remember those?
Yes.
Oh my. She made a dish. Do you remember sultanusses?
Of course.
Maybe what?
Sultanusses?
Yep.
Yes.
I have looked everywhere. I
You can't find
cannot find a recipe for it.
Sorry.
Oh, she's got to go.
No, sorry, I'm sorry.
I cannot find a recipe for that anywhere.
It was scrambled blintzes, but never.
She knew it because somebody told her that.
But
It
Mom,
was delicious.
after she died,
So she always knew it.
we tried. Different people have tried to make it.
I can't find a recipe. I can't find the name of it.
No, it's not, yeah.
The only thing I can find is that saltin means raisins,
Yeah,
or something like
I
that.
remember, that's how you
And I
broke,
think there were
that's how you broke
raisins.
fast.
Yeah, yeah.
You went to their house and
Or
you,
blintzes, also blintzes.
but that Salt and Us's was every year.
Shavuos. That was Shavuos.
I remember it being, I remember breaking fast, I don't
I
remember.
think it was Shavuos.
Well,
I've
that
looked
makes
in-
sense, because she was a dairy.
Dairy. I've looked into every Jewish cookbook, cannot find it. Cannot find it.
I don't know. how-
Every possible spelling I can think of.
So,
Because you like switch it back.
What?
what do you remember about Mom's coffee?
What?
What do you remember about Mom's
And then if you're
coffee?
even close,
Coffee.
it knows like each approximate letter is an algorithm.
Me too.
All right, Jeremy.
I have to
Much
pee.
faster.
Grandpa, thank you.